Looking back now, at 23 years in the rabbinate, I recognize that my career thus far has had two main stages. The first stage is what I would call my mitzvah mission. When I became a rabbi, I believed that my job was to inspire Jews to be better Jews, to be more observant Jews, to become more learned and more connected to mitzvot, to eat more like Jews should eat, to pray more like Jews should pray, to grow spiritually, which is what I believe ultimately is the goal of our faith. Admittedly, this was a frustrating mission. I was told, you're not really Reform, you're Orthodox, you're conservative. I was told I could never compete with cheeseburgers and stone crabs. But I persisted. I grew myself, picking up new mitzvot and becoming more observant in my own practice along the way. That was stage one of my career. Stage two began not long after the horrific shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh and the neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville. Even though I had always been a devout Zionist and a proud Jew, my mission up until that point was mitzvah-focused religious inspiration. I led trip after trip to Israel, not for political reasons, but because I hoped that those trips would inspire congregants to return stateside, eager to become more active temple members and more committed Jews. But something changed inside of me after Pittsburgh and Charlottesville. Perhaps it was my arrival in Miami and the opportunity to serve this holy community. I'm not exactly certain. But whatever it ultimately was, I realized deep in my heart that my mission was to stand up for my people, to protect my people, to advocate for Israel, to lash out at anti-Semites, and fight anti-Semitism. I don't mean to say that so many other things haven't been important along the way. But looking back now, it is clear to me that these two goals have added so much color and character to my rabbinate thus far. And then came October 7th. An unending war in Israel ensued, and sweeping global anti-Semitism engulfed all corners of world Jewry. There were warning signs early and already on the horizon. After all, Charlottesville and Pittsburgh were not that long ago. But we did not necessarily understand how and from where this new mutation of anti-Semitism would attack us. We could not have imagined that a Palestinian Instagram account at Columbia University that had gone dark and lay dormant for months and months would all of a sudden come back to life in the early hours of October 7th, already prepared with a toolkit for how to support Hamas. While we knew that Palestinian propaganda had been focusing on intersectionality with other minorities for years, we could not have expected to see virtually every other ethnic or marginalized group in this country rush to tear down pictures of hostages, deny Hamas's horrific sexual crimes, or champion such warped slogans as globalize the Intifada, from the river to the sea, and death to the IDF. We could not have imagined, even in the deepest recesses of our mind, that a term such as Holocaust inversion a term that characterizes Jews as Nazis, could exist in this country and in our lifetime. But day after day, we see the mainstream media, social media, international politicians, dignitaries, and celebrities of all stripes normalizing terms like starvation and genocide, as if they understood those terms as well as we do, still less than 100 years after the Holocaust. This current tsunami of hate is multifaceted. There is, of course, the rage of most of the Muslim world whose sympathies have always lay with the Palestinians. There's the wrath of Muslim refugees that have flooded the streets of many Western countries to the point where they have influenced the political climate in places like France, England, Canada, and Australia to turn their backs on Israel. And then perhaps most painful is the no longer dormant anti-Semitism that has burst forth here in the United States. On October 25th, 2023, just 2 weeks after the horrors of October 7th, Reuters reported that anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. rose by 400% in slightly over 2 weeks since the war broke out. For many of the hateful bottom feeders that capitalized on war in Israel and found a new opportunity to voice their bigotry, the same old themes were at play. A new blood libel against Jews as a result of the war in Gaza. Conspiracies that Jeffrey Epstein was an agent of the Mossad. Repeated claims that AIPAC has bought Washington and controls the American political system. The same old canards and stereotypes are once again at play. They are gaining steam, and they are dangerous. In such a moment, as in the past, there is a tendency for Jews to wonder, did we bring this upon ourselves? Is the rise of anti-Semitism Bibi's fault? Is it the fault of his right-wing coalition? Is it true that we are too successful in this country and that we have a disproportionate measure of control given our meager population numbers? Have we prospered where so many other minorities have come up short? Were we too adamant in our support for Israel and not sympathetic enough to the plight of the Palestinians? Did world Jewry ultimately bring this tsunami of anti-Semitism upon ourselves? In the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible, there's one book that we read every year that answers all of these questions. Each spring, when the holiday of Purim arrives, we read the scroll of Esther and ponder why Haman wanted to wipe out all of world Jewry. In chapter 3 of Esther, once Haman is elevated by the king to a position of great prestige, it was ordered that everyone in the kingdom must bow down before him. And all of the courtiers and king's subjects willingly bowed before Haman, with the exception of one, a Jew named Mordecai. When they asked him why he refused to bow, he explained that bowing before humans was forbidden in his religion. This response sent Haman into a rage. But not just against Mordecai. His fury was directed beyond the individual Mordecai and onto the very system of belief that placed a foreign god above his own honor. And that fury extended to anyone who adhered to such a system. Haman sought then to devise a plan to rid the world of this particular people that would dare to believe in a single almighty deity. In his quest to accomplish this goal, he turned to propaganda. Esther chapter 3 verse 8 teaches. Haman then said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people, scattered and dispersed among the other peoples in all the provinces of your realm, whose laws are different than those of any other people, and who do not obey the king's laws. And it is not in your majesty's interest to tolerate them." In that one verse, we see each of the ancient canards that have endured until this day. Haman turned his anger against one Jew into a hatred for all Jews. He decried the Jews for being stateless, even though he descended from a nation that denied Israel's right to a homeland. He argued that the customs and traditions of Jews would have deleterious effects on neighboring Gentile communities. He argued that Jews could not be trusted. They were disobedient and disloyal. He shouted the same phony invectives that the pharaohs declared in Egypt, that were devised in the palaces of the czars, that were shouted up and down the beer halls of Munich a little less than 100 years ago. The Jews will cause rebellion and anarchy. The Jews poison our wells. The Jews will inspire revolution. The Jews stabbed us in the back and caused our defeat and humiliation in World War I. But Mordecai and Esther never backed down. They didn't apologize for who they were or what they believed. Instead, they turned inward and encouraged more Jewish observance. They pleaded to a higher power for salvation, and they never once apologized for who they were, or how they observed their faith, or what they believed. In the years following the French Revolution, European thinkers started to embrace for the first time during the Enlightenment the idea that morality and ethical behavior could be discovered in ways that transcended religious dogma. And because of this thought, new opportunities opened up for Jews in society. Many European countries either relaxed their anti-Semitic laws or fully emancipated their Jews. And Jews took advantage. They entered universities, learned new trades, assimilated into broader cultures like never before. Their stature rose in society, and as they did, they conformed more and more to secular culture and non-Jewish practice. But it wasn't long before the backlash arrived. In 1819, riots broke out in various German states in response to Jews trying to force themselves into German society. The hateful composer Richard Wagner and other anti-Semites of his ilk warned the intellectual classes that Jews, no matter how Germanized, would always defile German society. Similar riots broke out in France, Switzerland, Russia, and other countries, leaving Jewish communities to wonder, what did we do wrong to invite such vicious responses? In the same vein as Mordecai and Esther, Jewish leaders like Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch and thinkers like Theodor Herzl strongly cautioned Jews from contemplating such guilt. Herzl argued that only self-determination could truly emancipate the Jew. And Rabbi Hirsch, in his hallowed work, The 19 Letters, wrote clearly in letter number 18 that Jew hatred is the result of other nations resenting Israel's moral mission and calling. Anti-Semitism, he taught, is a reaction to our role as a light unto the nations. It has nothing to do with our behavior, our customs, or our assimilation. He, like Herzl, urged the Jewish people never to apologize for the hatred that grew in the hearts of their non-Jewish neighbors. Since October 7th, we've stood on the front lines of the diplomatic war against Israel and the Jewish people. Whether we realized it or not, we have reclaimed the spirit of Herzl and men and women like Jabotinsky that reframed how the Jewish people and the world see the Jew. With the birth of a Jewish state, as one well-known author wrote, the creation of Israel as a nation gave all Jews around the world a reason to rise. In today's world, our detractors are trying to undo that history. They're trying to defile the holiness of the term Zionism, which should simply be defined as the movement that recognized and rectified the unjust eviction of our people from our ancestral and historical homeland. Anti-Zionists today, in their corrupted PC nomenclature, want to ask each one of us a question. Are you a good Jew or a bad Jew? Do you support Israel or not? If you don't support Israel, great, you're welcome among us. But if you do, well, then you make us feel unsafe, and we will have to shun you. Their strategy puts the Jew in a lose-lose situation. Either you defend Israel and you are canceled, or you turn your back on Israel in order to remain in their good graces. This is the new form of forcing Jews to apologize for our enemies' hatred of us. My answer to these detractors has been, for the last decade or so, to defend, to battle, to explain Israel's actions and Hamas's brutality. But there's been another response to October 7th that has also inspired me. Do you know that in Israel, many people began saying, I went to bed on October 7th an Israeli, and I woke up on October 8th a Jew. Did you know that more than one Israeli general has told me that since the war has started, more soldiers than ever are wearing kippot? Did you know that from the time this war began, attendance at synagogues around the world has not diminished, it has multiplied? The Jews are becoming more Jewish. They've been forced, maybe for the first time, to really defend Israel, and they are rising to the challenge. We are rising to the challenge. Services here at Beth Am are better attended. And it's not just because of me. I was here even before October 7th. Interest in Jewish topics, in learning how to defend Israel, in returning to the hallowed teachings of our faith, have all increased right here at Beth Am. And as we rise to this moment, we are merging what I once called the first two stages of my career. We're fighting terrorism with Torah, and we are listening closely to the hallowed echoes of our ancestors. We have awoken from our slumber, embraced our tradition, and recognized that even as much of the world has turned against us, our mission to bring light to the world remains just and necessary. And because we have turned inward to the words and teachings of our faith, we've had the courage to then turn outward and fight dearly for the divine principles that we cherish. I've often thought over the last few years of one of the struggles of my greatest heroes, Dr. Martin Luther King. I think of how he knew so clearly that he was right and the rest of the world was wrong. He knew what his scriptures taught him, and he knew how people were supposed to treat each other. Though the world told him he was wrong, he knew that he was right. On April 16th, 1963, while sitting in a Birmingham jail cell for the crime of leading a nonviolent civil rights demonstration, Dr. King used his time to write a famous letter to clergymen who saw his actions in Birmingham as an unwise agitation. In his letter, he wrote, "I have been disappointed. I've heard numerous religious leaders of the South call upon their worshipers to comply with desegregation because it is the law. But I have longed to hear white ministers say, follow this decree because integration is morally right. I have heard you say," he wrote, "those are social issues with which the gospel has no real concern. And I have watched so many churches commit themselves to completely otherworldly religion, which made a strange distinction between body and soul, the sacred and the secular." Dr. King knew he was right and his white Southern colleagues were wrong. He knew they could not find the reflection of their own souls even in the mirrors of their own scriptures. But he marched on, knowing that despite it all, the cause of justice was on his side, and that history, as he taught, would always bend toward the arc of justice. Over these last 2 years, we have felt imprisoned, incarcerated and confined by the constant attacks on our people. The war rolls on in Israel. The hostages keep us awake and unsettled day and night. Anti-Semitism spreads like wildfire, and ignorance and hatred rule the day. But despite it all, we know what Dr. King knew. We know that justice and truth march on our side, and that no matter how violently the storm crashes upon us, nor how loudly the drum beats against us, we know that we are buffered by the purity of our prophetic tradition. To those who have assumed the positions as the next in the long line of our enemies, to those who hide their hatred of all things Jewish behind the misguided term anti-Zionism, to them I offer no apology nor concede any matter. But for all those who stand with me in the second stage of my rabbinate, who march against anti-Semitism, who stand proudly this day as Jews, who defend our brothers and sisters in Israel, I urge you to join me in joining and merging both of the two stages together. Because of stage 2, our love for our people, we must hearken like Esther and Mordecai to stage 1, our commitment to our heritage. On this holy day, we, like our ancestors in every generation before us, are reminded of the words of Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, "The more they hate me because I am Jewish, the prouder I must be to stand Jewish." On this holy day, I'm inviting you and asking you to join me inside of Dr. King's Birmingham jail cell. I'm inviting you to reach with me for his pen. And as the walls of incarceration surround us, let us shout on Dr. King's letterhead that we too are right, that the arc of justice does bend in our direction, and that not only have we been to the mountaintop, we created the experience of the mountaintop that allowed the whole world to see the glory of the coming of the Lord. As the prophet Isaiah wrote, "And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all its flesh shall see together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken." Amen.